Chapter 11 of Literary Taste, How to Form It, by Arnold Bennett. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Timothy Ferguson. Literary Taste, How to Form It, by Arnold Bennett. Chapter 11, An English Library, Period 1. For much counsel and correction in the matter of editions and prices, I am indebted to my old and valued friend Charles Young, head of the firm of Lamley & Co., booksellers, South Kensington. For the purposes of book buying, I divide English literature not strictly into historical epochs, but into three periods which, while scarcely arbitrary from the historical point of view, have nevertheless been calculated according to the space which they will occupy on the shelves, and to the demands which they will make on the purse. 1. From the beginning to John Dryden, or roughly to the end of the 17th century. 2. From William Congreve to Jane Austen, or roughly the 18th century. 3. From Sir Walter Scott to the last deceased author who is recognised as a classic, or roughly the 19th century. Period 3 will bulk the largest and cost the most. Not necessarily because it contains more absolutely great books than other periods, though in my opinion it does, but because it is nearest to us, and therefore fullest of interest for us. I have not confined my choice to books of purely literary interest, that is to say, to works which are primarily works of the literary art. Literature is a vehicle of philosophy, morals, science, religion, and history, and a library which aspires to be complete must comprise, in addition to imaginative works, all these branches of intellectual activity. Comprising all these branches, it cannot avoid comprising works of which the purely literary interest is almost nil. On the other hand, I have excluded from consideration 1. Works whose sole importance is that they form a link in the chain of development. For example, nearly all the productions of authors between Chaucer and the beginning of the Elizabethan period, such as Gower, Hoccleve, and Skelton, whose works, for sufficient reason, are only read by professors, and students who mean to be professors. 2. Works not originally written in English, such as the works of that very great philosopher Roger Bacon, of whom this isle ought to be prouder than it is. To this rule, however, I have been constrained to make a few exceptions. Sir Thomas More's Utopia was written in Latin, but one does not easily conceive a library to be complete without it. And could one exclude Sir Isaac Newton's Principia, the masterpiece of the greatest physicist that the world has ever seen? The law of gravity ought to have, and does have, a powerful sentimental interest for us. 3. Translations from foreign literature into English. Here, then, are the lists for the first period. Prose writers: Bede, Ecclesiastical History, Temple Classics, 1s. 6d. Sir Thomas Malory, Morte d'Arthur, Everyman's Library, 4 volumes, 4s. Sir Thomas More, Utopia, Scott Library, 1s. George Cavendish, Life of Cardinal Wolsey, New Universal Library, 1s. Richard Hakluyt, Voyages, Everyman's Library, 8 volumes, 8s. Richard Hooker, Ecclesiastical Polity, Everyman's Library, 2 volumes, 2s. Francis Bacon, Works, Nune's Thin Paper Classics, 2s. Thomas Dekker, Gull's Hornbook, King's Classics, 1s. 6d. Lord Herbert of Cherbury, Autobiography, Scott Library, 1s. John Selden, Table Talk, New Universal Library, 1s. Thomas Hobbes, Leviathan, New Universal Library, 1s. James Howell, Familiar Letters, Temple Classics, 3 volumes, 4s. 6d. Sir Thomas Browne, Religio Medici, etc., Everyman's Library, 1s. Jeremy Taylor, Holy Living and Holy Dying, Temple Classics, 3 volumes, 4s. 6d. Isaac Walton, Complete Angler, Everyman's Library, 1s. John Bunyan, Pilgrim's Progress, World's Classics, 1s. Sir William Temple, Essay on Gardens of Epicurus, King's Classics, 1s. and 6d. John Evelyn, Diary, Everyman's Library, 2 volumes, 2s. Samuel Pepys, Diary, Everyman's Library, 2 volumes, 2s. Total £2, 1s. and 6d. The principal omission from the above list is the Paston Letters, which I should probably have included had the enterprise of publishers been sufficient to put an edition on the market at a cheap price. Other omissions include the works of Caxton and Wycliffe, and such books as Camden's Britannia, Ascham's Schoolmaster, and Fuller's Worthies, whose lack of first-rate value as literature is not adequately compensated by their historical interest. As to the Bible, in the first place, it is a translation, and in the second, I assume that you already possess a copy. Poets. Beowulf, Routledge's London Library, 2s. and 6d. Geoffrey Chaucer, Works, Globe Edition, 3s. and 6d. Nicholas Udall, Ralph Royster Doyster, Temple Dramatists, 1s. Edmund Spenser, Works, 3s. and 6d. Thomas Lodge, Rosalind, Caxton Series, 1s. Robert Greene, Tragical Reign of Selimus, Temple Dramatists, 1s. Michael Drayton, Poems, Nune's Pocket Classics, 8s. and 6d. Christopher Marlowe, Works, New Universal Library, 1s. William Shakespeare, Works, Globe Edition, 3s. and 6d. Thomas Campion, Poems, Muses Library, 1s. Ben Jonson, Plays, Canterbury Poets, 1s. John Donne, Poems, Muses Library, 2 volumes, 2s. John Webster Cyril Tournier, Plays, Mermaid Series, 2s. and 6d. Philip Massenger, Plays, Cunningham Edition, 3s. and 6d. Beaumont and Fletcher, Plays, a Selection, Canterbury Poets, 1s. John Ford, Plays, Mermaid Series, 2s. and 6d. George Herbert, The Temple, Everyman's Library, 1s. Robert Herrick, Poems, Muses Library, 2 volumes, 2s. Edmund Waller, Poems, Muses Library, 2 volumes, 2s. Sir John Suckling, Poems, Muses Library, 1s. Abram Cowley, English Poems, Cambridge University Press, 4s. and 6d. Richard Crashaw, Poems, Muses Library, 1s. Henry Vaughan, Poems, Methuen Little Library, 1s. and 6d. Samuel Butler, Hudibras, Cambridge University Press, 4s. and 6d. John Milton, Poetical Works, Oxford Cheap Edition, 2s. John Milton, Select Prose Works, Scott Library, 1s. Andrew Marvell, Poems, Methuen's Little Library, 1s. and 6d. John Dryden, Poetical Works, Globe Edition, 3s. and 6d. Thomas Percy, Relics of Ancient English Poetry, Everyman's Library, 2 volumes, 2s. Arber's Spenser Anthology, Oxford University Press, 2s. Arber's Johnson Anthology, Oxford University Press, 2s. Arber's Shakespeare Anthology, Oxford University Press, 2s. Total £3, 7s. and 6d. There were a number of brilliant minor writers in the 17th century whose best work, often trifling in bulk, either scarcely merits the acquisition of a separate volume for each author, or cannot be obtained at all in a modern edition. Such authors, however, may not be utterly neglected in the formation of a library. It is to meet this difficulty that I have included the last 3 volumes on the above list. Professor Arber's anthologies are full of rare pieces, and comprise admirable specimens of the verse of Samuel Daniel, Giles Fletcher, Countess of Pembroke, James I, George Peele, Sir Walter Raleigh, Thomas Sackville, Sir Philip Sidney, Drummond of Hawthornden, Thomas Heywood, George Wither, Sir Henry Wotton, Sir William Davenant, Thomas Randolph, Francis Quarles, James Shirley, and other greater and lesser poets. I've included all of the important Elizabethan dramatists except John Marston, all editions of whose works, according to my researchers, are out of print. In the Elizabethan and Jacobean periods, talent was so extraordinarily plentiful that the standard of excellence is quite properly raised, and certain authors are thus relegated to the third or excluded class, who in a less fertile period would have counted as at least second class. Summary of the First Period. 19 prose authors in 36 volumes, costing £2, 1 shilling and sixpence. 29 poets in 36 volumes, costing £3, 7 shillings and sixpence. Total, 48 authors in 72 volumes, costing £5, 9 shillings. In addition, scores of authors of genuine interest are represented in the anthologies. The prices are gross, and in many instances there is a 25% discount to come off. All the volumes can be procured immediately at any booksellers. End of Chapter 11. Recording by Timothy Ferguson, Gold Coast, Australia. Chapter 12 of Literary Taste, How to Form It, by Arnold Bennett. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Timothy Ferguson. Literary Taste, How to Form It, by Arnold Bennett. Chapter 12. An English Library, Period 2. After dealing with the formation of a library of authors up to John Dryden, I must logically arrange next a scheme for the period covered roughly by the 18th century. There is, however, no reason why the student in quest of a library should follow the chronological order. Indeed, I should advise him to attack the 19th century before the 18th, for the reason that, unless his taste happens to be peculiarly Augustan, he will obtain a more immediate satisfaction and profit from his acquisitions in the 19th century than in the 18th. There is in 18th century literature a considerable proportion of what I may term an attractive excellence, which one must have for the purposes of completeness, but which may await actual perusal until more pressing and more human books have been read. I have particularly in mind the philosophical authors of the century. Prose writers. John Locke, Philosophical Works, Bond's edition, 2 volumes, 7 shillings. Sir Isaac Newton, Principia, sections 1, 2, and 3, Macmillan's, 12 shillings. Gilbert Burnet, History of His Own Time, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. William Wycherley, Best Plays, Mermaid Series, 2 shillings and sixpence. William Congreve, Best Plays, Mermaid Series, 2 shillings and sixpence. Jonathan Swift, Tale of a Tub, Scott Library, 1 shilling. Jonathan Swift, Gulliver's Travels, Temple Classics, 1 shilling and sixpence. Daniel Defoe, Journal of the Plague Year, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. Joseph Addison, Sir Richard Steele, Essays, Scott Library, 1 shilling. William Law, Serious Call, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. Lady Mary W. Montagu, Letters, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. George Berkeley, Principles of Human Knowledge, New Universal Library, 1 shilling. Samuel Richardson, Clarissa, abridged, Routledge's edition, 2 shillings. John Wesley, Journal, Everyman's Library, 4 volumes, 4 shillings. Henry Fielding, Tom Jones, Routledge's edition, 2 shillings. Henry Fielding, Amelia, Routledge's edition, 2 shillings. Henry Fielding, Joseph Andrews, Routledge's edition, 2 shillings. David Hume, Essays, World's Classics, 1 shilling. Lawrence Sterne, Tristram Shandy, World's Classics, 1 shilling. Lawrence Sterne, Sentimental Journey, New Universal Library, 1 shilling. Horace Walpole, Castle of Otranto, King's Classics, 1 shilling and sixpence. Tobias Smollett, Humphrey Clinker, Routledge's edition, 2 shillings. Thomas Smollett, Travels Through France and Italy, World's Classics, 1 shilling. Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations, World's Classics 2 volumes, 2 shillings. Samuel Johnson, Lives of the Poets, World's Classics 2 volumes, 2 shillings. Samuel Johnson, Rasselas, New Universal Library, 1 shilling. James Boswell, Life of Johnson, Everyman's Library, 2 volumes, 2 shillings. Oliver Goldsmith, Works, Globe Edition, 3 shillings and sixpence. Henry Mackenzie, The Man of Feeling, Cassell's National Library, 6d. Sir Joshua Reynolds, Discourses on Art, Scott Library, 1 shilling. Edmund Burke, Reflections on the French Revolution, Scott Library, 1 shilling. Edmund Burke, Thoughts on the Present Discontents, New Universal Library, 1 shilling. Edward Gibbon, Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, World's Classics 7 volumes, 7 shillings. Thomas Paine, Rights of Man, Watts & Co.'s edition, 1 shilling. Richard Brinsley Sheridan, Plays, World's Classics, 1 shilling. Fanny Burney, Evelina, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. Gilbert White, Natural History of Selborne, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. Arthur Young, Travels in France, York Library, 2 shillings. Mungo Park, Travels, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. Jeremy Bentham, Introduction to the Principles of Morals, Clarendon Press, 6 shillings and sixpence. Thomas Robert Malthus, Essay on the Principle of Population, Ward Locke's edition, 3 shillings. William Godwin, Caleb Williams, Nunes edition, 1 shilling. Maria Edgeworth, Helen, Macmillan's Illustrated edition, 2 shillings and sixpence. Jane Austen, Novels, Nelson's New Century Library, 2 volumes, 4 shillings. James Moriah, Haji Baba, Macmillan's Illustrated Novels, 2 shillings and sixpence. Total £5, 1 shilling. The principal omissions here are Jeremy Collier, whose outcry against the immorality of the stage is his slender title to remembrance; Richard Bentley, whose scholarship principally died with him, and whose chief works are no longer current; and Junius, who would have been deservedly forgotten long ago, had there been a contemporaneous Sherlock Holmes to ferret out his identity. Poets: Thomas Otway, Venice Preserved, Temple Dramatists, 1 shilling. Matthew Prior, Poems on Several Occasions, Cambridge English Classics, 4 shillings and sixpence. John Gay, Poems, Muses Library, 2 volumes, 2 shillings. Alexander Pope, Works, Globe Edition, 3 shillings. Isaac Watts, Hymns, any hymn book, 1 shilling. James Thomson, The Seasons, Muses Library, 1 shilling. Charles Wesley, Hymns, any hymn book, 1 shilling. Thomas Gray, Samuel Johnson, William Collins, Poems, Muses Library, 1 shilling. James Macpherson, Ossian, Poems, Cambridge Poets, 1 shilling. Thomas Chatterton, Poems, Muses Library, 2 volumes, 2 shillings. William Cowper, Poems, Canterbury Poets, 1 shilling. William Cowper, Letters, World's Classics, 1 shilling. George Crabbe, Poems, Methuen Little Library, 1 shilling and sixpence. William Blake, Poems, Muses Library, 1 shilling. William Lyse Bowles, Hartley Coleridge, Poems, Canterbury Poets, 1 shilling. Robert Burns, Works, Globe Edition, 3 shillings and sixpence. Total £1, 7 shillings. Summary of the period: 39 prose writers in 60 volumes costing £5, 1 shilling. 18 poets in 18 volumes costing £1, 7 shillings. Total 57 writers in 78 volumes costing £6, 8 shillings. End of chapter 12. Recording by Timothy Ferguson, Gold Coast, Australia. Of Literary Taste, How to Form It, by Arnold Bennett. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Timothy Ferguson. Literary Taste, How to Form It, by Arnold Bennett. Chapter 13. An English Library, Period 3. The catalogue of necessary authors in this third and last period being so long, it is convenient to divide the prose writers into imaginative and non-imaginative. In the latter half of the period, the question of copyright affects our scheme to a certain extent, because it affects prices. Fortunately, it is the fact that no single book of recognised first-rate general importance is conspicuously dear. Nevertheless, I have encountered difficulties in the second rank. I have dealt with them in a spirit of compromise. I think I may say that, though I should have included a few more authors had their books been obtainable at a reasonable price, I have omitted none that I consider indispensable to a thoroughly representative collection. No living author is included. Where I do not specify the edition of a book, the original copyright edition is meant. Prose writers, imaginative. Sir Walter Scott, Waverley, Heart of Midlothian, Quentin Durward, Red Gauntlet, Ivanhoe. Everyman's Library, 5 volumes, 5s. Sir Walter Scott, Marmion, etc., Canterbury Poets, 1s. Charles Lamb, Works in Prose and Verse, Clarendon Press, 2 volumes, 4s. Charles Lamb Letters, Nune's Thin Paper Classics, 2s. Walter Savage Landor, Imaginary Conversations, Scott Library, 1s. Walter Savage Landor, Poems, Canterbury Poets, 1s. Leigh Hunt, Essays and Sketches, World's Classics, 1s. Thomas Love Peacock, Principal Novels, New Universal Library, 2 volumes, 2s. Mary Russell Mitford, Our Village, Scott Library, 1s. Michael Scott, Tom Cringle's Log, Macmillan's Illustrated Novels, 2s. 6d. Frederick Marriott, Mr. Midshipman Easy, Everyman's Library, 1s. John Galt, Annals of the Parish, Everyman's Library, 1s. Susan Ferrier, Marriage, Routledge's Edition, 2s. Douglas Jerrold, Mrs. Caudle's Curtain Lectures, World Classics, 1s. Lord Lytton, Last Days of Pompeii, Everyman's Library, 1s. William Carlton, Stories, Scott Library, 1s. Charles James Lever, Harry Lorrequer, Everyman's Library, 1s. Harrison Ainsworth, The Tower of London, New Universal Library, 1s. George Henry Borrow, Bible in Spain, Lavengro, New Universal Library, 2 volumes, 2s. Lord Beaconsfield, Sybil, Coningsby, Lane's New Pocket Library, 2 volumes, 2s. W. M. Thackeray, Vanity Fair, Esmond, Everyman's Library, 2 volumes, 2s. W. M. Thackeray, Barry Lyndon and Roundabout Papers, etc. Nelson's New Century Library, 2s. Charles Dickens, Works, Everyman's Library, 18 volumes, 18s. Charles Reade, The Cloister and the Hearth, Everyman's Library, 1s. Anthony Trollope, Barchester Towers, Framley Parsonage, Lane's New Pocket Library, 2 volumes, 2s. Charles Kingsley, Westward Ho, Everyman's Library, 1s. Henry Kingsley, Ravenshoe, Everyman's Library, 1s. Charlotte Bronte, Jane Eyre, Shirley, Villette, Professor, and Poems, World's Classics, 4 volumes, 4s. Emily Bronte, Wuthering Heights, World's Classics, 1s. Elizabeth Gaskell, Cranford, World's Classics, 1s. Elizabeth Gaskell, Life of Charlotte Bronte, 2s. 6d. George Eliot, Adam Bede, Silas Mariner, The Mill on the Floss, Everyman's Library, 3 volumes, 3s. G. J. White Melville, The Gladiators, New Universal Library, 1s. Adam Smith, Dreamthorpe, New Universal Library, 1 shilling. George MacDonald, Malcolm, 1 shilling and sixpence. Walter Pater, Imaginary Portraits, 6 shillings. Wilkie Collins, The Woman in White, 1 shilling. R. D. Blackmore, Lorna Doone, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. Samuel Butler, Erewhon, Fifields edition, 2 shillings and sixpence. Lawrence Oliphant, Altiora Petto, 3 shillings and sixpence. Margaret Oliphant, Salem Chapel, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. Richard Jefferies, Story of My Heart, 2 shillings. Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland, Macmillan's cheap edition, 1 shilling. John Henry Shorthouse, John Inglesant, Macmillan's Pocket Classics, 2 shillings. R. L. Stevenson, Master of Ballantrae, Virginibus Puresque, Pocket Edition, 2 volumes, 4 shillings. George Gissing, The Odd Women, Popular Edition, bound, 7d. Total, £5 and a penny. Names such as Charlotte Yonge and Dinah Crake are omitted intentionally. Prose writers non-imaginative. William Hazlitt, Spirit of the Age, World's Classics, 1 shilling. William Hazlitt, English Poets and Comic Writers, Bond's Library, 3 shillings and sixpence. Francis Jeffrey, Essays from Edinburgh Review, New Universal Library, 1 shilling. Thomas de Quincey, Confessions of an English Opium Eater, etc., Scott Library, 1 shilling. Sidney Smith, Selected Papers, Scott Library, 1 shilling. George Finlay, Byzantine Empire, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. John G. Lockhart, Life of Scott, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. Agnes Strickland, Life of Queen Elizabeth, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. Hugh Miller, Old Red Sandstone, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. J. H. Newman, Apologia Pro Vita Sua, New Universal Library, 1 shilling. Lord Macaulay, History of England, 3 volumes. Essays, 2 volumes. Everyman's Library, 5 volumes, 5 shillings. A. P. Stanley, Memorials of Canterbury, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. Thomas Carlyle, French Revolution, 2 volumes. Cromwell, 3 volumes. Sartor Resartus and Heroes and Hero Worship, 1 volume. Everyman's Library, 6 volumes, 6 shillings. Thomas Carlyle, Latter-day Pamphlets, Chapman and Hall edition, 1 shilling. Charles Darwin, Origin of the Species, Murray's edition, 1 shilling. Charles Darwin, Voyage of the Beagle, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. A. W. Kinglake, Eothen, New Universal Library, 1 shilling. John Stuart Mill, Auguste Comte and Positivism, New Universal Library, 1 shilling. John Brown, Horae Subsecave, World's Classics, 1 shilling. John Brown, Rab and His Friends, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. Sir Arthur Helps, Friends in Council, New Universal Library, 1 shilling. Mark Patterson, Life of Milton, English Men of Letters series, 1 shilling. F. W. Robertson, On Religion and Life, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. Benjamin Jowett, Interpretation of Scripture, Routledge's London Library, 2 shillings and sixpence. George Henry Lewes, Principles of Success in Literature, Scott Library, 1 shilling. Alexander Bain, Mind and Body, 4 shillings. James Anthony Froude, Dissolution of the Monasteries, etc., New Universal Library, 1 shilling. Mary Wollstonecraft, Vindication of the Rights of Women, Scott Library, 1 shilling. John Tyndall, Glaciers of the Alps, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. Sir Henry Maine, Ancient Law, New University Library, 1 shilling. John Ruskin, Seven Lamps, 1 volume. Sesame and Lilies, 1 volume. Stones of Venice, 3 volumes. George Allen's cheap edition, 5 volumes, 5 shillings. Herbert Spencer, First Principles, 2 volumes, 2 shillings. Herbert Spencer, Education, 1 shilling. Sir Richard Burton, Narrative of a Pilgrimage to Mecca, Bond's edition, 2 volumes, 7 shillings. J. S. Speake, Sources of the Nile, Everyman's Library, 1s. Thomas Henry Huxley, Essays, Everyman's Library, 1s. E. A. Freeman, Europe, Macmillan's Primers, 1s. William Stubbs, Early Plantagenets, 2s. Walter Bagehot, Lombard Street, 3s. 6d. Richard Holt Hutton, Cardinal Newman, 3s. 6d. Sir John Seeley, Ecce Homo, New Universal Library, 1s. David Mason, Thomas de Quincey, English Men of Letters Series, 1s. John Richard Green, Short History of the English People, 8s. 6d. Sir Leslie Stephen, Pope, English Men of Letters Series, 1s. Lord Acton, On the Study of History, 2s. 6d. Mandell Creighton, The Age of Elizabeth, 2s. 6d. F. W. H. Myers, Wordsworth, English Men of Letters Series, 1s. Total £4, 10s. 6d. The following authors are omitted, I think, justifiably: Hallam, Whewell, Grote, Faraday, Herschel, Hamilton, John Wilson, Richard Owen, Sterling Maxwell, Buckle, Oscar Wilde, P.G. Hamerton, F.D. Morris, Henry Sidgwick, and Richard Jebb. Lastly, here is the list of poets. In the matter of price per volume, it is the most expensive of all of the lists. This is due to the fact that it contains a larger proportion of copyright works. Where I do not specify the edition of a book, the original copyright edition is meant. Poets. William Wordsworth, Poetical Works, Oxford edition, 3s. 6d. William Wordsworth, Literary Criticism, Nowell Smith's edition, 2s. 6d. Robert Southey, Poems, Canterbury Poets, 1s. Robert Southey, Life of Nelson, Everyman's Library, 1s. S.T. Coleridge, Poetical Works, Nune's Thin Paper Classics, 2s. S.T. Coleridge, Biographia Literaria, Everyman's Library, 1s. S.T. Coleridge, Lectures on Shakespeare, Everyman's Library, 1s. John Keats, Poetical Works, Oxford edition, 3s. 6d. Percy Bysshe Shelley, Poetical Works, Oxford edition, 3s. 6d. Lord Byron, Poems, E. Hartley Coleridge's edition, 6s. Lord Byron, Letters, Scott Library, 1s. Thomas Hood, Poems, World's Classics, 1s. James and Horace Smith, Rejected Addresses, New Universal Library, 1s. John Keble, The Christian Year, Canterbury Poets, 1s. George Darley, Poems, Muses Library, 1s. T. L. Beddoes, Poems, Muses Library, 1s. Thomas Moore, Selected Poems, Canterbury Poets, James Clarence Mangan, Poems, D. J. Donohue's edition, 3s. 6d. W. Mackworth Prayed, Poems, Canterbury Poets, 1s. R. S. Hawker, Cornish Ballads, C. E. Byles' edition, 5s. Edward Fitzgerald, Omar Khayyam, Golden Treasury Series, 2s. 6d. P. J. Bailey, Festus, Routledge's edition, 3s. 6d. Arthur Hugh Clow, Poems, Muses Library, 1s. Lord Tennyson, Poetical Works, Globe edition, 3s. 6d. Robert Browning, Poetical Works, World's Classics, 2 volumes, 2s. Elizabeth Browning, Aurora Leigh, Temple Classics, 1s. 6d. Elizabeth Browning, Shorter Poems, Canterbury Poets, 1s. P. B. Marston, Songtide, Canterbury Poets, 1s. Aubrey de Vere, Legends of St. Patrick, Cassell's National Library, 6d. Matthew Arnold, Poems, Golden Treasury Series, 2s. 6d. Matthew Arnold, Essays, Everyman's Library, 1s. Coventry Patmore, Poems, Muses Library, 1s. Sidney Dobell, Poems, Canterbury Poets, 1s. Eric Mackay, Love Letters of a Violinist, Canterbury Poets, 1 shilling. T.E. Brown, Poems, 7 shillings and sixpence. C.S. Calverley, Verses and Translations, 1 shilling and sixpence. D.G. Rossetti, Poetical Works, 3 shillings and sixpence. Christina Rossetti, Selected Poems, Golden Treasury Series, 2 shillings and sixpence. James Thomson, City of Dreadful Night, 3 shillings and sixpence. Jean Ingelow, Poems, Red Letter Library, 1 shilling and sixpence. William Morris, The Earthly Paradise, 6 shillings. William Morris, Early Romances, Everyman's Library, 1 shilling. Augusta Webster, Selected Poems, 4 shillings and sixpence. W. E. Henley, Poetical Works, 6 shillings. Francis Thompson, Selected Poems, 5 shillings. Total, £5, 7 shillings. Poets who I have omitted after hesitation are Ebenezer Elliott, Thomas Woolner, William Barnes, Gerald Massey, and Charles Jeremiah Wells. On the other hand, I have no hesitation about omitting David Moore, Felicia Hemans, Ayton, Sir Edward Arnold, and Sir Lewis Morris. I have included John Keble in deference to much enlightened opinion, but against my own inclination. There are 2 names in the list which may be somewhat unfamiliar to many readers. James Clarence Mangan is the author of My Dark Rosaline, an acknowledged masterpiece which every library must contain. T.E. Brown is a great poet, recognised as such by a few hundred people, and is assuredly destined to a far wider fame. I have included Fitzgerald because Omar Khayyam is much less a translation than an original work. Summary of the 19th Century. 83 prose writers in 141 volumes, costing £9, 10 shillings and 7 pence. 38 poets in 46 volumes, costing £5, 7 shillings. Total 121 writers in 187 volumes, costing £14, 17 shillings and 7 pence. Grand summary of complete library. 1 to Dryden, 48 authors, 72 volumes, £5, 9 shillings. 2 18th Century, 57 authors, 78 volumes, £6, 8 shillings. 3 19th Century, 121 authors, 187 volumes, £14, 17 shillings and 7 pence. Total 226 authors, 337 volumes, £26, 14 shillings and 7 pence. I think it will be agreed that the total cost of this library is surprisingly small. By laying out the sum of 6pence a day for 3 years, you may become the possessor of a collection of books which, for range and completeness in all branches of literature, will bear comparison with libraries far more imposing, more numerous, and more expensive. I have mentioned the question of discount. The discount which you will obtain, even from a bookseller in a small town, will be sufficient to pay for Chambers' Cyclopedia of English Literature, 3 volumes, price 30 shillings net. This work is indispensable to a bookman. Personally, I owe it much. When you have read, wholly or in part, a majority of these 335 volumes, with enjoyment, you may begin to whisper to yourself that your literary taste is formed, and you may pronounce judgment on modern works which come before the bar of your opinion, in the calm assurance that, though to err is human, you do, at any rate, know what you are talking about. End of chapter 13. Recording by Timothy Ferguson, Gold Coast, Australia. Of Literary Taste, How to Form It, by Arnold Bennett. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Timothy Ferguson. Literary Taste, How to Form It, by Arnold Bennett. Chapter 14. Mental Stocktaking. Great books do not spring from something accidental in the great men who wrote them. They are the effluence of their very core, the expression of the life itself of the authors. And literature cannot be said to have served its true purpose until it has been translated into the actual life of him who reads. It does not succeed until it becomes the vehicle of the vital. Progress is the gradual result of the unending battle between human reason and human instinct, in which the former, slowly but surely, wins. The most powerful engine in this battle is literature. It is the vast reservoir of true ideas and high emotions, and life is constituted of ideas and emotions. In a world deprived of literature, the intellectual and emotional activity of all but a few exceptionally gifted men would quickly sink and retract to a narrow circle. The broad, the noble, the generous would tend to disappear for want of accessible storage, and life would be correspondingly degraded, because the fallacious idea and the petty emotion would never feel the upward pull of the ideas and emotions of genius. Only by conceiving a society without literature can it be clearly realized that the function of literature is to raise the plane toward the top level of the peaks. Literature exists so that where one man has lived finely, 10,000 may afterwards live finely. It is a means of life. It concerns the living essence. Of course, literature has a minor function, that of passing the time in an agreeable and harmless fashion by giving momentary faint pleasure. Vast multitudes of people, among whom may be numbered not a few habitual readers, utilize only this minor function of literature. By implication, they class it with golf, bridge, or soporifics. Literary genius, however, had no intention of competing with these devices for fleeting the empty hours, and all such use of literature may be left out of account. You, O serious student of many volumes, believe that you have a sincere passion for reading. You hold literature in honour, and your last wish would be to debase it to a paltry end. You are not one of those who read because the clock has just struck 9, and one can't go to bed till 11. You are animated by a real desire to get out of literature all that literature will give, and in that aim you keep on reading, year after year, and the grey hairs come. But amid all this steady tapping of the reservoir, do you ever take stock of what you have acquired? Do you ever pause to make a valuation in terms of your own life of that which you are daily absorbing, or imagine that you are absorbing? Do you ever satisfy yourself by proof that you are absorbing anything at all, that the living waters, instead of vitalizing you, are not running off you as though you were a duck in a storm? Because if you omit this mere business precaution, it may well be that you too, without knowing it, are little by little joining the triflers who have read only because eternity is so long. It may well be that even your alleged sacred passion is, after all, merely a sort of drug habit. The suggestion disturbs and worries you. You dismiss it impatiently, but it returns. How, you ask unwillingly, can a man perform a mental stock-taking? How can he put a value on what he gets from books? How can he effectively test, in cold blood, whether he is receiving from literature all that literature has to give him? The test is not so vague, nor so difficult, as it might appear. If a man is not thrilled by intimate contact with nature, with the sun, with the earth, which is his origin and the arouser of his acutest emotions, if he is not troubled by the sight of beauty in many forms, if he is devoid of curiosity concerning his fellow men and his fellow animals, if he does not have glimpses of the nuity of all things in an orderly progress, if he is chronically querulous, dejected, and envious, if he is pessimistic, if he is one of those who talks about this age of shams, this age without ideals, this hysterical age, and this heaven knows what age, then that man, though he reads undisputed classics for 20 hours a day, though he has a memory of steel, though he rivals Porson in scholarship and St. Beau in judgment, is not receiving from literature what literature has to give. Indeed, he is chiefly wasting his time. Unless he can read differently, it were better for him if he sold all his books, gave to the poor, and played croquet. He fails because he has not assimilated into his existence the vital essences which genius put into the books that have merely passed before his eyes. Because genius has offered him faith, courage, vision, noble passion, curiosity, love, a thirst for beauty, and he has not taken the gift. Because genius has offered him the chance of living fully, and he is only half alive. For it is only in the stress of fine ideas and emotions that a man may be truly said to live. This is not a moral invention, but a simple fact, which will be attested by all who know what that stress is. What? You talk learnedly about Shakespeare's sonnets? Have you heard Shakespeare's terrific shout? Full many a glorious morning I have seen flatter the mountain tops with sovereign eye, kissing with golden face the meadows green, gilding pale streams with heavenly alchemy. And yet, can you see the sun over the viaduct in Loughborough Junction of a morning, and catch its rays in the Thames off Dewar's Whisky Monument, and not shake with the joy of life? If so, you and Shakespeare are not yet in communication. What, you pride yourself on your beautiful edition of Casaubon's translation of Marcus Aurelius, and you savour the cadences of the famous "This day I shall have to do with an idle, curious man, with an unthankful man, a railer, a crafty, false, or envious man. All these ill qualities have happened unto him, through ignorance of which is truly good and truly bad. But I that understand the nature of that which is good, that it only is to be desired, and of that which is bad, that it only is truly odious and shameful, who knows moreover that this transgressor, whosoever he be, is my kinsman, not by the same blood and seed, but by participation of the same reason and of the same divine particle, how can I be hurt? You would be ashamed of your literary self to be caught in ignorance of Whitman, who wrote, "Now understand me well. It is provided in the essence of things that from any fruition of success, no matter what, shall come forth something to make a greater struggle necessary." And yet, having achieved a motor car, you lose your temper when it breaks down halfway up a hill. You know your Wordsworth, who has been trying to teach you about the upholder of the tranquil soul that tolerates the indignities of time, and, from the centre of eternity, all finite motions overruling, lives in glory immutable. But you are capable of being seriously unhappy when your suburban train selects a tunnel for its repose. And the A.V. of the Bible, which you now read, not as your forefathers read it, but with an aesthetic delight, especially in the Apocrypha, you remember, "Whosoever is brought unto thee, take cheerfully, and be patient when thou art changed to a low estate. For gold is tried in the fire, and acceptable men in the furnace of adversity." And yet you are ready to lie down and die because a woman has scorned you. Go to. You think some of my instances approach the ludicrous? They do. They are meant to do so. But they are no more ludicrous than life itself. And they illustrate in the most workaday fashion how you can test whether your literature fulfills its function of informing and transforming your existence. I say that if daily events and scenes do not constantly recall and utilize the ideas and emotions contained in the books which you have read or are reading, if the memory of these books does not quicken the perception of beauty wherever you happen to be, does not help you to correlate the particular trifle with the universal, does not smooth out irritation and give dignity to sorrow, then you are, consciously or not, unworthy of your high vocation as a bookman. You may say that I am preaching a sermon. The fact is, I am. My mood is a severely moral mood. For when I reflect upon the difference between what books have to offer and what even relatively earnest readers take the trouble to accept from them, I am appalled, or should be appalled, did I not know that the world is moving, by the sheer inefficiency, the bland, complacent failure of the earnest reader. I am like yourself. The spectacle of inefficiency rouses my holy ire. Before you begin upon another masterpiece, set out in a row the masterpieces which you are proud of having read during the past year. Take the first on the list, that book which you perused in all the zeal of your New Year's resolutions for systematic study. Examine the compartments of your mind. Search for the ideas and emotions which you have garnered from that book. Think and recollect when last something from that book recurred to your memory apropos of your own daily commerce with humanity. Is it history? When did it throw a light for you on modern politics? Is it science? When did it show you order in apparent disorder and help you put two and two together into an inseparable four? Is it ethics? When did it influence your conduct in a twopenny, halfpenny affair between man and man? Is it a novel? When did it help you to understand all and forgive all? Is it poetry? When was it a magnifying glass to disclose beauty to you, or a fire to warm your cooling faith? If you can answer these questions satisfactorily, your stock-taking as regards the fruit of your traffic with that book may be reckoned satisfactory. If you cannot answer them satisfactorily, then either you chose the book badly, or your impression that you read it is a mistaken one. When the result of this stock-taking forces you to the conclusion that your riches are not so vast as you thought them to be, it is necessary to look about for the causes of the misfortune. The causes may be several. You may have been reading worthless books. This, however, I should say at once, is extremely unlikely. Habitual and confirmed readers, unless they happen to be reviewers, seldom read worthless books. In the first place, they are so busy with books of proved value that they have only a small margin of leisure time left for very modern works, and generally before they can catch up with the age, time or the critic has definitively threshed for them the wheat from the chaff. No, mediocrity has not much chance of hoodwinking the serious student. It is less improbable that the serious student has been choosing his books badly. He may do this in two ways, absolutely and relatively. Every reader of long standing has been through the singular experience of suddenly seeing a book with which his eyes have been familiar for years. He reads a book with a reputation and thinks, yes, this is a good book, this book gives me pleasure, and then, after an interval, perhaps half a lifetime, something mysterious happens to his mental sight. He picks up the book again and sees a new and profound significance in every sentence, and he says, I was perfectly blind to this book before. Yet he is no cleverer than he used to be. Only something has happened to him. Let a gold watch be discovered by a supposititious man who has never heard of watches. He has a sense of beauty. He admires the watch, and takes pleasure in it. He says, this is a beautiful piece of bric-a-brac. I fully appreciate this delightful trinket. Then imagine his feelings when someone comes along with the key. Imagine the light flooding his brain. Similar incidents occur in the eventful life of the constant reader. He has no key, and never suspects that there exists such a thing as a key. This is what I call a choice absolutely bad. The choice is relatively bad when, spreading over a number of books, it pursues no order, and thus results in a muddle of faint impressions, each blurring the rest. Books must be allowed to help one another. They must be skilfully called in to each other's aid. And that this may be accomplished, some guiding principle is necessary. And what, you demand, should that guiding principle be? How do I know? Nobody, fortunately, can make your principles for you. You have to make them for yourself. But I will venture upon this general observation, that in the mental world what counts is not numbers, but coordination. As regards facts and ideas, the great mistake made by the average well-intentioned reader is that he is content with the names of things instead of occupying himself with the causes of things. He seeks answers to the question, what, instead of to the question, why. He studies history and never guesses that all of history is caused by facts of geography. He is a botanical expert and can take you to where Sibthorpa Europa grows, and never troubles to wonder what the earth would be like without its cloak of plants. He wanders forth on starlit evenings and will name you with unction all the constellations from Andromeda to the Scorpion. But if you ask him why Venus can never be seen at midnight, he will tell you he has not bothered with the scientific details. He has not learned that names are nothing, and the satisfaction of the lust of the eye is a trifle compared to the imaginative vision of which scientific details are the indispensable basis. Most reading, I am convinced, is unphilosophical. That is to say, it lacks the element which more than anything else quickens the poetry of life. Unless and until a man has formed a scheme of knowledge, be it a mere skeleton, his reading must necessarily be unphilosophical. He must have attained to some notion of the interrelations of the various branches of knowledge before he can properly comprehend the branch in which he specialises. If he has not drawn an outline map upon which he can fill in whatever knowledge comes to him as it comes, and on which he can trace the affinity of every part with every other part, he is assuredly frittering away a large percentage of his efforts. There are certain philosophical works which, once they are mastered, seem to have performed an operation for cataract, so that he who was blind, having read them, henceforward sees cause and effect working in and out everywhere. To use another figure, they leave stamped on the brain a chart of the entire province of knowledge. Such a work is Spencer's First Principles. I know that it is nearly useless to advise people to read First Principles. They are intimidated by the sound of it, and it costs as much as a dress circle seat at the theatre. But if they would, what brilliant stock-takings there might be in a few years. Why, if they would only read such detached essays as that on Manners and Fashion, or The Genesis of Science, in a sixpenny volume of Spencer's essays published by Watts & Co., the magic illumination, the necessary power of synthesizing things might be vouchsafed to them. In any case, the lack of some such disciplinary coordinating measure will amply explain many disastrous stock-takings. The manner in which one single ray of light, one single precious hint, will clarify and energize the whole mental life of him who receives it, is among the most wonderful and heavenly of intellectual phenomena. Some men search for that light and never find it, but most men never search for it. The superlative cause of disastrous stock-takings remains, and it is much more simple than the one with which I have just dealt. It consists in the absence of meditation. People read and read and read, blandly unconscious of their effrontery and assuming that they can assimilate without any further effort the vital essence which the author has breathed into them. They cannot. And the proof that they do not is shown all the time in their lives. I say that if a man does not spend at least as much time in actively and definitely thinking about what he has read as he has spent in the reading, he is simply insulting his author. If he does not submit himself to intellectual and emotional fatigue in classifying the communicated ideas, and in emphasizing on his spirit the imprint of the communicated emotions, then reading with him is a pleasant pastime and nothing else. This is a distressing fact, but it is a fact. It is distressing for the reason that meditation is not a popular exercise. If a friend asks you what you did last night, you may answer, "I was reading," and he will be impressed, and you will be proud. But if you answer, "I was meditating," then he will have a tendency to smile, and you will have a tendency to blush. I know this. I feel it myself. I cannot offer any explanation. But it does not shake my conviction that the absence of meditation is the main origin of disappointing stocktakings. End of chapter 14. Recording by Timothy Ferguson, Gold Coast, Australia. End of Literary Taste, How to Form It, by Arnold Bennett.